Are you experiencing a conflict at work with a supervisor, a coworker? Well, in today's session on the Enneagram, we're going to explore the wings and a way to wing your way through conflict. The wings are basically your complementary types on either side of your core type on the Enneagram diagram. And what they basically do is they really help you counterbalance your core type. And we can take some of the healthiest traits of your core type and complement them with your wings so that you have a better toolkit to navigate conflicts and complexities at work. So, if you missed our initial session and you don't know your Enneagram type, I would encourage you to watch that particular session. And then our last session was really about motivations, really delving into the characteristics and traits of each Enneagram type, and then exploring the underlying motivation of each type. And by understanding other people at work and what their primary motivation is, that can be very, very useful. At Aperture Advisory Associates, we're really committed to bringing you tools that you can utilize in the workplace environment that will have an impact not only on team morale, but team building, your level of confidence, the leadership style that you bring to the table, and how to improve communications and interactions with coworkers. So let's take a peek at the Enneagram diagram and look at the wings for your particular type. So if you are the reformer, for instance, your wings would be the peacemaker and helper. And if you are the helper, your wings would be the reformer and the achiever. If you're the achiever, your wings would be the helper and individualist. If you're the individualist, your wings would be the achiever and investigator. And then if you're the investigator, your wings would be for the individualist and the loyalist. And then if you're the loyalist, it would be the enthusiast and the investigator. And then if you're the enthusiast, it would be the challenger and the loyalist. And then last but not least, if you're the peacemaker, your wings would be the challenger and the reformer. So basically, on the Enneagram, there are these different areas where you look at not only your core type, but like I said, the wings, because they have some healthy traits, and typically most people have a dominant wing, meaning that they lean towards a certain set of characteristics and traits versus the other wing. But some people claim that they are a balance between the two. And sometimes your wings even can change during the course of your lifetime, depending on the situation. For instance, if you were in a very high pressure job and now you're working at home, your wing might be a little bit different, for instance. So let's just take a peek at each one of the types and talk about conflict within the context of using our wings and some of the healthier traits of the Enneagram types. So first of all, if you are the reformer, you are always trying to improve things. You are trying to reform things. You are trying to take the team to the highest level. You are trying to be very accurate and exacting as you execute certain projects or processes. But in the process of being the reformer, some people may feel that you are holding them to a standard that they may not be too keen on applying to their own work. So they may even sometimes feel that you are judging them, or perhaps that you are being critical of them because you're trying to take the team to this very high standard. Or if you're interacting with your supervisor, for instance, They may feel that you're getting too caught up in details, for instance, and not looking at the macro picture of a certain situation. Um, but the benefit of being the reformer too is not only that leaning towards accuracy and really taking things to the highest level, but typically reformers have a high set of ethics and principles. So, say you are in a conflict with a coworker or your supervisor over a specific project, and you don't see eye to eye. Well, by leaning into your helper, perhaps you can ask questions like, how can I help you move this project along? It doesn't seem like we see eye to eye, and I really want to make sure that you feel like your voice is valued and that, we can all work together to improve things. The other aspect too is that you have your peacemaker on your other side. So your other wing could be more leaning into a communication that would go something like this if you're in conflict. I really see the need for collaboration and consensus on this project, and I want to make sure that my contribution is meaningful and is making sense to everyone. What are your thoughts? Because the peacemaker is so keen on building consensus and building collaboration, sometimes their voice gets lost. So make sure that you ask the peacemaker to voice his or her opinions. That could really help you ease that conflict. Whereas with the helper giver, you might need to say, how can I help you out? Because the helper giver is always giving to others and sometimes at their own expense. So you want to be empathic. You want to say to that helper giver, wow, I see that you're really extending yourself a lot, and maybe we're not all pitching in. Let's make sure that this is a balanced situation. So think about that for a moment. Take that in as the reformer and think about whether you lean a little bit more towards the helper giver or towards the peacemaker at work, and then how you can use your dominant wing or both wings and some of those healthy traits to move things along and get through the conflict at hand. Now, let's say you are the helper giver and you are really stressed out right now. You feel like you're under a lot of pressure. You feel like you're taking on the lion's share of this project, and you can feel the conflict in the group. You can feel that everybody's not doing their fair share. You're starting to feel a little bit resentful, and you feel like, you want to make sure everybody is feeling supported and understood. So the helper, if you lean into your one, the reformer, you may think about the fact that as you're moving through this project and you're sensing conflict, sometimes the helper is so keen on making sure that the emotional landscape is in order that maybe they're moving off the task at hand. So make sure that your work is accurate. Make sure that you are following right actions ethically. Make sure that you are aspiring towards excellence, because you have those traits in that one reformer wing. So why not lean into that to create more balance? You can also lean into your 3, the achiever wing. Because once again, the achiever is that person that's going to get the task done, going to get the project done, and that may in and of itself alleviate the conflict. And also, you can make sure that, you are sharing with others, that you're not just caught up in the emotional conflict at hand, that you are very committed to getting the job done, getting the task done, and, shining as needed, and having a voice in that process, and really contributing on all levels. So now let's move to the achiever type. So you've got this conflict, you're working on this project with others, you're trying to barrel through this. But as the achiever, one of the things that you do is you focus so much on doing that you may forget about just being in sync with the team, understanding what the conflict is with your supervisor or coworkers on this project. So step back a moment and just think about, where does the conflict lie? Is it with the deadline? Is it with the task at hand? Is it the fact that some people are getting too caught up in their own interpersonal arenas? What is the situation, and how can you employ that helper giver to help you address the conflict at hand? So maybe you need to be empathic. Maybe you need to demonstrate compassion. Maybe you need to better understand the other people's stressors as you're trying to move through the conflict. You could also lean towards your individualist wing. So if that's your more dominant wing, maybe what you really want to do is not only focus on getting the project done and addressing the conflicts at hand, but making the authenticity and the integrity come through. Really focused in on meaningful work, work that stands out, that really is going to make the team shine as a whole, not just about you as a top-notch achiever. So the achiever can sometimes be a bit competitive. And so the individualist can help you address that, because the individualist also often tries to understand different people's perspectives, and they want to make sure that the output of what they're doing is not only just, achieving to a standard of excellence like the one would want you to achieve, but really rings true, has meaning, has integrity, stands out, is really going to make a difference. And that helper giver is really going to help you as an achiever be more empathic, be more compassionate, be more kind, and give and help others as they move through the conflict at hand. So really try and utilize those two wings and some of those very positive traits of both the helper and the individualist. Now, let's say you are the individualist. You want to stand out, you want to be different, but in the course of doing that, that in and of itself can create conflict with others, because they may just be trying to get the task done, like the achiever, or they may have very high standards for accuracy, like the reformer, or the helper. They may just be trying to make sure everybody's getting along, and that they're helping others as they move through a stressful situation. But the individualist, at its best, at its healthiest, can really help affect change, because they tend to be change agents. They love change. And they love looking at, the whole picture of something and seeing how they can have a transformative impact. So your wing as the achiever is going to help you stay on task, keep the project moving, check off that Franklin Covey project tracker every day, because sometimes the individualist can get so caught up in wanting to stand out or make this huge difference that they may forget to keep the projects moving, really manage their time effectively. And they may be looking for what is missing and start to lean into deficiencies instead of just leaning towards what is positive and what is moving forward. So that can be a really good way to look at the achiever as a counterbalance to keep you moving, keep you on task, and achieve the end goal. You also have the investigator. I love to think of the investigator also as a very observant person, because the observer aspect of the investigator is really that analytical aspect, whereas the 4 can sometimes be very creative and right brain. Think of the 5 as the left brain side of the brain, and providing that level of analysis, observation, researching options before you arrive at a final conclusion. So if you are in conflict with your supervisor or a coworker on a project or process, you really need to lean into that investigator type, because that's going to help you step back, analyze, be a bit more reserved, um, be a little bit less passionate and emotional about the situation, so that you can detect what is the core conflict and what is going to make a difference. Do we need to come up with more options? Do we need to do more research? Do we need to analyze this from a different perspective? Do we need to look at data, for instance? So now let's turn to the investigator. If you are a 5, like I said, you tend to be very observant. You tend to be a little bit more reserved, whereas the individualist tends to be more passionate, a bit more emotional. So you can benefit from demonstrating your passion. Maybe people are thinking, or your boss is thinking, boy, you really just don't seem to care much. You're a bit indifferent. But that may just be your analytical side kicking in. That may just be your level of reservation or reserve. So employ a little bit of passion and enthusiasm as you approach a project or process. And also as it applies to conflict. You see a conflict brewing, address it head on. Hey, what's happening? What is causing our conflict here? Be very direct, because that can serve you well as the investigator. You're observing something, you're picking up on conflict, and you want to keep this project moving, but you've got to figure out what it is that you have to do in order to make that happen. The loyalist can also help you, because the loyalist has that tendency to be a bit skeptical, to step back once again and look at things from different angles. But the loyalist has this very interesting aspect. They can either be very risk averse or very high risk taking. So maybe you, as the investigator, if you're with someone who is a little bit high risk, maybe that could serve you well. Maybe you need to take a little bit more risk in addressing the group and figuring out what the conflict is, or maybe you need to be a little bit more high risk as it pertains to just getting through the project and stopping all of your research, stopping all of your analysis, and not moving into analysis paralysis, so that you can move forward and get along well with your boss or coworkers and keep the project moving. So now let's move to the loyalist, the skeptic, the risk averse, or the high risk taker. So if you are the loyalist and you're facing a conflict at work, lean into that investigator, because the investigator is going to help you just observe. Before you apply skepticism, apply the 5, the observer. Just try and detect what's happening before you analyze everything, and decide what kind of risk to take, either a high risk or a low risk. Make sure that you really employ that observational mode. And the loyalist is really trying to get along with the team, because they are loyal. They are protective of the team. They are loyal to their bosses as well. So you want to lean into those healthy traits of being loyal to everyone and making sure everyone feels like, there's no backbiting going on, there's no politicking going on. But at the same time, you want to employ that observational mode of the investigator And then you also want to lean into the enthusiast, the 7. The enthusiast is that sense of adventure, trying to look at that macro picture. So the loyalist can really benefit from, the enthusiast tendency to understand the inner workings and inner mechanics of something and how they intersect, and also the high level of enthusiasm that the enthusiast can bring to the table. And sometimes the loyalists, once again, maybe you're being questioned, hey, you're not showing much enthusiasm for this project, or you're being too skeptical, or why aren't you taking more risk? That's where that 7, the enthusiast, can really give you a jump start and help you resolve the conflict with your boss or your coworkers if they're having those kinds of question marks about your commitment and your participation. So now let's talk about the enthusiast. So as the enthusiast, as you know, you're so excited about so many different things. Life is a great adventure, but you can get bored. So maybe the conflict centers around the fact that you're not digging into this project. You're not staying the course to the finish line. And those are sometimes the downfalls of the enthusiast. But the high side, that healthy side, is getting things done, getting everybody excited about the project, showing everybody the inner mechanics and inner workings of the project at hand, and resolving conflict by showing everybody, the potential outcome and the excitement of this great adventure, and getting things moving and resolving the conflict and getting the project at hand done. Now, you can lean into a little bit of skepticism, because I think you need that to make yourself a bit more healthy and counterbalance with the loyalists. And you can also moderate your level of risk too, because you may be, needing to be balanced in your level of risk taking as it applies to the conflict and the project at hand. So think about that, and then think about your challenger wing. Your challenger wing is going to be a great counterbalance as well, because the challenger is very assertive. The challenger wants to get things done, may sometimes be a little bit on the less patient side with others, but the enthusiast sometimes needs to be assertive. Sometimes you need to assert how excited you are about the project, the fact that you do see these interconnections and that you want to share that with everyone, and that you want everyone to take a reasonable level of risk as you move through that process, but that you're committed to the end goal of achieving the ultimate outcomes that everyone has in mind. So now let's move to the challenger. So if you're the challenger and you're faced with a conflict, the peak of the challenger is that, you have a tremendous capacity to be really great, to demonstrate this kind of formidable strength. And people sometimes even don't really understand that you have any vulnerabilities at all, because you barrel through things, you get things done, you take charge, you take command, you're a strong natural leader. But as the challenger, you may need to lean into your 2 wings, the enthusiast, so that people don't feel like you're being too judgmental of their frailties or their lack of strength in certain areas. They may want you to lead them through this great adventure, and that's where that enthusiast can really come in handy. So people don't just feel like, you're taking this kind of dominant lead, but that you're leading them in a visionary way against a very enthusiastic, kind of adventurous modality. And then the peacemaker is really going to come in handy for the challenger too, because once again, conflict is often about collaboration and not being able to build consensus. So lean into those healthy traits of the peacemaker as you help the team navigate more complexities. Or let's say you're working with your boss. You want to work with your supervisor in that collaborative consensus building mode. You don't want to, appear too combative because the end goal and understanding what that outcome is going to serve you best. Last but not least, the peacemaker. If you're the peacemaker and you're facing conflict, your natural tendency is immediately to try and zero in on the emotional aspect of what is going on and build consensus, get everyone to collaborate and work in harmony. But don't lose your voice, because the peacemaker has strong opinions and needs to have that voice. So you need that assertion of the challenger type. You need to step in and assert your opinion and ideas. That will help oftentimes resolve the conflict instead of just stirring the pot and getting nowhere. And you also need the reformer. You need these lofty aspirational goals to share with others so everybody can see that you're really trying to improve things. You're really trying to build consensus, not just to have everybody get along, but to achieve the ultimate outcome and achieve those standards of excellence against very high principles and values. So this has given you an idea of your core type and how to use your wings when you're in some kind of a conflict, especially as it pertains to a project or process that's going on in the workplace. And really think about each of the healthy traits of all types on the Enneagram, because ultimately we are not just one or the other. In our optimal health, we do incorporate all aspects of the Enneagram to be very healthy individuals. But as children, we started to lean towards our core type, as I had pointed out before, so that we strategically move through life and we feel successful and we feel good about how we are navigating. And we can use these other healthy traits from our wings to really create not only balance, but give us skill sets for navigating some of the complexities of conflict. And conflict at work typically centers around differences. We don't see eye to eye with someone because we are, in fact, by personality, different than that person. So think about the core motivation of your type and how the different types differ. And that was covered in our last session. And then think about how your wings are really going to help better inform you the next time you face a conflict with someone. So I encourage you, the next time you're facing a conflict, give yourself an opportunity to step back and think about your aspirations and the highest goals and the highest ethics. That would be coming from the one. Think about how you can help others, how you can give and receive in an effort to build collaboration and consensus. Think about the achiever and how you can get things done, how you can focus in and compartmentalize tasks and larger projects, break them down into smaller components, and be focused not only on doing, but on understanding people and the group dynamic so people don't think that you're just all about the outcome. Think about standing out, being different, shaking things up, being a change agent, and really how that benefits the team in the end. And use those observational skills of the investigator to step back and look at things and really appreciate that person who is the observer in the group and is doing all that research, and appreciate all of the 9 types as they showcase their core strengths. And use a little bit of skepticism if needed, and be protective of the team. Be loyal to your team. That's really important. Sometimes we get so focused on being right that we forget about the relationships that are really our first and foremost priority. Because ultimately, we can't get anything done, we can't resolve any conflicts, we can't get any projects executed if the team doesn't feel supported and understood. And then continue to demonstrate enthusiasm. See projects and processes as that great adventure. And if you have an enthusiast on your team, make sure that you lean into getting to that finish line. There can be a plethora of ideas and possibilities, but ultimately you need to get to the finish line. The challenger, make sure that you assert your opinions and your voice. That is the key lesson from the challenger, and what they really bring to the world is no voice is insignificant, and make sure that you demonstrate your voice and your strengths. And if you're the peacemaker, make sure that you are using that voice. And really, everyone can benefit from the healthy aspects that the peacemaker brings, that collaborative, consensus building mode of operating. So I hope that today's session has given you some new insights. Aperture Advisory Associates offers staff training workshops on the Enneagram and other related workplace topics. Please check out our website at apertureadvisory.com. Our shop has the Enneagram assessment, and we do so much appreciate you subscribing, liking, and commenting on this session and future sessions. Typically, we post once per week, and we thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, open your aperture, and always remember your focus determines your reality, as stated by the great George Lucas.